let's move on now and examine the risk management implications of creating products and services for Generation Y. Senthil, of course, we can wax lyrical all day about these new types of consumers, but there is, a huge implication for how banks manage the risk. And I think that's really been underlined by the crisis and the recession, which has been quite hard on the middle classes in the UK and in Western Europe in a way that perhaps the risk models hadn't quite anticipated. So I'm interested to get your views on whether or not banks right now have enough data and information to manage the risk around dealing with this new generation, and what, in your view, are the implications? We talked a little bit about credit decisioning just earlier, but could you give me your general views on what you think banks have to consider in terms of risk managing and pricing products for this new generation?
I think it should evolve, because the preferences or consumption is going to be very different, or the consumption would be driven by the preferences. So you probably cannot group them by saying they belong to this, they are in this postcode, so this is the type of pricing you want to apply, which is the way we do conventionally. But I think it is how you can quickly bundle them and say this is the value that we deliver. Or you look at it the other way around, okay, this consumer for me at this point of time for the next 5 years is valuable, and this is the amount of dollars that I can expect out of this relationship, and then you price it accordingly. So the whole mechanism of absorbing that within the organization and using that information also needs to change. But the fundamentals of how you measure risk, or how you get to your credit decisioning process, or how you comply with regulations, those are not going to change. So you still need to report, you need to check for whether the transaction is properly done within the jurisdiction, does it follow the rules. So all of that remains the same. But the expectation on the other hand is people do expect global mobility in their account. One of the things that this generation expects is, oh, I have an account with this bank which is present in 100 countries, so I should be able to use it wherever I want to use it. Or when I move, this should move. But the underlying process is not wired to global mobility in a banking system, right? You can even track how your physical goods move in the logistics business on a web page from point to point, but you can't really track how cash is moving, right? So the big difference in the way the financial services is wired for global mobility. So the expectation is that the banks will need to still take care of that, but deliver to that expectation of global mobility. And I think a very large number of people in the Generation Y have that expectation of global mobility. They're fairly in the mass affluent category, a large portion of them, and they have these expectations that when I move, this account should move with me, or the attributes of what I do, or my history and my relationship with this product should also move into the new geography or the new place that I work with. A lot has been achieved in the telecom business. A lot has been done within the financial services world in terms of allowing and enabling use of debit and credit cards across networks. But I think the expectation of global mobility has a few more steps that needs to be fulfilled. And for that, there is a significant change that the banks need to go through to address the next generation. And that capability does not come by improving what they have, but they actually need to educate people internally, educate the regulators, and then put that change in process.
You mentioned the R word, which was what I was going to come on to next, which is that, again, we can talk about banks responding and creating products in response to feedback that they get through these channels that we typically associate with Web 2.0. But there's always this big constraining hand there of the regulator. Do you think that that will be a problem for banks in terms of how fast they can adapt to the Generation Y? And do we sort of have to accept ultimately that because of the nature of financial services, banks will never quite be able to perhaps fulfill the expectations of Generation Y due to regulatory constraints and compliance issues?
I don't think it will be any different from where the banks are today. It might be about the same or maybe even much better because people do understand where the business is coming from. So even for regulators to accept that there are some changes to be made. I think it's being a participant in the industry and being kind of on the sidelines, interacting with some of the key members of the banking community who are customers and looking at how the regulators view at it. I think it is possible to, through education, tell them where this global mobility is going and look at processes that are multi-jurisdictional and put them in place so that not just the home regulators addressed, but also the countries where you operate, those regulators are in sync with what you're doing. So then it is a single infrastructure. But I think today we do not have a mechanism to address from out of one instance anything that happens within the bank. That is the truth, right? So as banks grew their businesses, there have been multiple instances of the same system or same application or same process being replicated. So it's kindly different from what runs in the home country versus what runs across different parts of the world. So they might be servicing the same set of same or similar type of customers. So this is about bringing that to a single process across the enterprise and giving that level of transparency to the rest of the stakeholders, saying yes, the way it runs is the way we have defined it, and there is a lot more control in the bank to actually execute it that way, and that's how we can implement it. And I think that is the point where I think you will have a much better go at implementing global mobility for Generation Y.
Great, thank you. Senthil Kumar of Oracle, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. That's all we have time for.